Fresh from the beehive, a bitter battle over butter. With many saying dairy is too dear, ministers have been looking for someone to blame.
And I will leave it to Fonterra and the supermarkets to argue out.
The opposition is seizing the opportunity to smear the government's reputation.
It wasn't Fonterra that said they were going to bring down the price of cheese and butter and milk, it was Nicola Willis and it was Christopher Luxon.
And the Prime Minister's giving a return serve.
I'm not taking any lectures from frickin' Chris Hipkins.
Kia ora, ko Russell Palmer aho, anei te pūrongo tōrangapū mō tēnei wiki. Welcome to Focus on Politics. The Dairy Companies Association says New Zealand produces about 21 billion litres of milk a year, enough to satisfy some 90 million people. 95% of New Zealand's dairy products are exported to 130 other countries, making it Aotearoa's largest goods export industry, generating $25 billion this past year. And the Finance Minister is a particular fan.
I view butter as a beautiful, beautiful thing. I eat too much of it. I'm the kind of person who, when you see it on my piece of toast, it looks like some cheese. But I think it's wonderful, and I think New Zealanders in a country that turns grass into beautiful dairy should have the opportunity to purchase that product if they wish to.
But whether they can is increasingly uncertain. The cost of a 500-gram block is up 60% in the past year to an average of $8.60. When the Reserve Bank kept the official cash rate steady 2 weeks ago, Nicola Willis was asked whether the price was fair.
Look, I do worry about the cost of butter and milk, and I have noted that Costco, for whatever reason, is able to offer butter at around half the price that you see in our mainstream supermarkets. And that tells me that competition can drive better pricing behaviour. I'm also interested in the role that Fonterra plays in terms of the global dairy prices it's getting and how they translate here at home. I will be meeting with the Fonterra Chief Executive in the next little while to talk to him about what we can do to make sure that New Zealanders have affordable cheese, milk and butter.
A meeting with Fonterra and a stern word, perhaps, into the ears of our dairy giant. At the time, it was pointed out to the Minister the cost is largely due to the global price of milk.
Look, I accept at a high level that that's the case. When there's a lot of demand for dairy products, the price internationally goes up, and that's reflected here at home. My question is about why sometimes we're seeing cheaper prices in British or Australian supermarkets, and I'm interested to understand how much of that is about the lack of supermarket competition here and how much of that is about the prices that Fonterra is passing through. So those are discussions that I'm continuing because I know it bothers Kiwis.
A week and a half later, on Monday, the latest inflation figures surface, and it's not great news.
More expensive food, rents and power prices have driven inflation to a 12-month high.
The headline figure, the annual consumer price index, is up at 2.7%, the highest since last June. And once more, it's butter that's on everyone's lips.
The price of butter is very high.
The price of a block of butter.
And it's our butter, those are our cows.
Look, the fact is the price of butter is set in global auctions.
I use margarine, low-fat margarine.
It emerges Nicola Willis, Labour's finance spokesperson Barbara Edmonds, and the Deputy Prime Minister David Seymour all have meetings booked with Fonterra, set down for the next day. So when Tuesday rolls around, expectations and tensions are running high.
So how many blocks of butter can he buy for the $60 a week he claims to spend on groceries?
Well, it's a smart-ass answer, isn't it? Question, isn't it? But I'll just say to you, that member is supposed to be the leader of the opposition. And in opposition you oppose, but you also propose. There's no proposals from that side.
The meetings come and go, and the Finance Minister reappears the next day with a message.
I'm quite aware that there's been a high degree of excitement about a private meeting that I had last night with Miles Hurrell, the Chief Executive.
She's confident New Zealanders are not getting a raw deal.
I've been satisfied that I don't think consumers are getting a raw deal. I think that there is good work going on to ensure that there is pressure and competition from Fonterra to try and keep its prices low, but I get it. Butter is expensive right now. There's no getting away from that.
No getting away from it. Doesn't sound like much in the way of a firm solution, but there is one button the government can press.
All roads lead back to supermarket competition. I continue to believe that is the most powerful lever that the government has on this issue.
As yet, no further action on that. Fonterra's chief executive, Miles Hurrell, was a bit harder to get comment from post-meeting.
Wondering if you're able to answer a couple of questions on how the meeting went tonight.
Not at the moment.
Is there anything you're able to shed on how it went?
I'll talk to media in the morning.
But come the morning, crickets, despite the finance minister's suggestions.
I said to him yesterday, look, the explanation that you've given Miles, your ability to communicate it is great. Put yourself in front of a camera, and I've been assured that he will.
The dairy economist Michael Harvey from Rabobank tells Midday Report host Charlotte Cook there's only so much politicians and retailers can actually do.
Consumers are paying more. New Zealand consumers are probably feeling it first and hardest because of the industry structure in terms of, the majority of the milk that's produced in New Zealand goes into export markets. So consumers really do pay that global market pricing more. But it's something we're all dealing with.
Okay, and tell me, can consumers or the government do anything to bring the price down?
There is some capacity. What you'll see is, clearly, food manufacturers and the dairy manufacturers can obviously take a bit of a margin hit, not pass through the full cost to consumers, but that comes at a margin squeeze for their business. You can get some reformulation in food manufacturing, so bakery manufacturers and things like that can look at alternative fat products and things like that. You can get the retailers starting to really ramp up promotional and marketing activity, but that ultimately won't change the underlying fundamentals. We've got a very high butter price in the global market because of the fundamentals. I still think over time, what you will see is the market will correct. What you're going to get is a supply response. So, milk production's growing again in a lot of production regions around the world. That will mean more milk will be flowing into butter production. You'll get some demand destruction as well, whether it's at consumer level or in the food manufacturing sector, so you get a recalibration.
But in the meantime, costs are still running hot. On Thursday, Fonterra finally fronts up.
The cost of living, that is a topic of conversation we hear every day. That is not lost on us. We appreciate and understand that. But when you get into, specifically around a block of butter that you may buy in the supermarket here, roughly 80% of the price of that is determined by that international market and driven by that international market that has got a growing need for both dairy fats and dairy protein, very much underpinned by strong demand out of places like China, but it goes goes well but beyond that as well. I know the Finance Minister talked about sort of some margins in that 5 to 10% range, and of course when we talk margins, it's really important that we clarify this is not a profit. This is margins that cover the costs of everyone in that supply chain, whether that be retailers, whether it be processors or wholesalers or any distribution outfits that may exist along that supply chain, and getting product from what is a bulk format that we sell internationally into something that you may purchase here in the local retail market. Of course, then you get it into GST on top of that.
Miles Hurrell says the company needs to pay its farmers, and it is becoming more efficient, keeping the costs down where possible.
As I said, there's a 5 to 10% here. We talk about margin, but that is a cost that is incurred across the organisation, whether it be people, whether it be processes, whether it be transportation, logistics. So, those costs exist. Our costs this year across the organisation will be line ball with what the costs were across the organisation last year, which shows we're becoming more efficient as an organisation, despite the fact we've seen inflationary pressures on our own individual costs. So that shows we are becoming more efficient, and we'll pass those efficiency gains on where we can.
They simply cannot afford to discount butter specifically for Kiwi families.
We see a new butter plant opening in New Zealand in the next month or so. We know that an international competitor of ours is opening a new butter plant here in New Zealand. They've been very transparent and very vocal that none of that will be sold in the New Zealand market. So I ask the question to you, why would they not sell anything in the domestic market? Because they can make more money for that and sell it into international market. So we know we have an obligation to sell here in New Zealand, and we do that, and we support the New Zealand economy. But our job is to not come in with a two-tier pricing system, to your question, and discount here in the New Zealand market where we have an international obligations to operate as well.
But those at home will be saying, the product is produced just down the road. Why charge international rates for something that's produced so close to where their dinner table is or breakfast table is?
But I have an obligation to try and support the New Zealand economy at the same time. So as I say, a very small portion of that is sold in New Zealand. My job is to think about us as the role we play in the international market and the role we play here in New Zealand.
By now, the Finance Minister was starting to feel the butter frenzy had become a little overblown.
And Look, I'm a transparent, open communicator. When I was being asked about the price of dairy products, I conveyed that that was an issue I was interested in relation to supermarket competition and Costco, and I also conveyed that I'd be checking in on my assumptions about Fonterra's approach. I felt that was appropriate. My history with Fonterra is very well known. I think it would be wrong if I wasn't testing my assumptions with them and giving them the opportunity to present their case.
Political editors Thomas Coughlin from The Herald and our very own Craig McCulloch joined Morning Report host Corin Dan to dissect the politics of it all.
It sort of took on a bit of a life of its own, and the government, for a while, I think, was quite happy for it to sound like this is what the government was doing to address the cost of butter, until it realised that there was very little the meeting would do to resolve the issue and address the cost of butter. Because actually, on balance, as Miles Harrell said, on balance, the high cost of butter is probably a good thing for New Zealand.
He's out there getting door-stopped by cameras, looking like, and all of a sudden he's being portrayed as the villain.
In a really unenviable position. There is not going to be a lot of public sympathy out there for Fonterra or for Miles Harrell on his many $1 million salary. Ultimately, though, Fonterra is not accountable to the taxpayer, it's accountable to its farmers. There is a question of social licence, of course. It's public relations. Fonterra's public relations probably lacking a little bit this week. Took a long time for Miles Harrell to front up, and I just don't think that there was a reason for that. He has a defensible position. 80% of butter prices are determined by the global market. We know that. The rest is processing, distribution, and then the margin. So, Fonterra cannot be expected to sell at a loss. That is just not sustainable in the long term. So he has a defensible argument, but he has to make it.
Don't be deceived, though, into thinking the butter brouhaha is all froth. In many ways, it is indicative of the wider cost of living crisis, and Labour's Chris Hipkins has sensed a vulnerability.
At the last election, you might recall that Christopher Luxon promised New Zealand families with kids $250 a fortnight. The government haven't been able to identify one single family that's received that. As part of that, they promised over 21,000 families that they'd be getting the maximum amount under the Family Boost childcare rebate. It turns out only 153 families have received that through the last year. I think it shows that they misjudged the Family Boost policy. It's an absolute flop. But they're continuing to dig in and say that this is what they'd intended all along, shows that they're really out of touch with the pressure that New Zealand families are under. At a time when the price of butter is over $10, they're telling families they've got to wait until next year before they get $7 a week in extra support. Bearing in mind they promised families more than that at the last election. So again, that is another broken promise. I'm sure we'll get into that in due course. But this is a government that said they were going to fix the cost of living for New Zealand families. New Zealand families certainly aren't feeling that at the moment.
The PM, Christopher Luxon, is pushing back. He says the opposition's failed to come up with any policies or ideas for solving the problem.
The biggest driver of inflation in this last week, as you would have seen, was council rates. And I'd love the members' support to put a cap on council rates.
Mr. Speaker, is the purchasing power of someone on the minimum wage greater or lesser than it was when he became the Prime Minister as a result of his government's decision to increase the minimum wage by less than inflation for 2 years in a row?
Well, what I can say to the member is infinitely New Zealanders are doing better under this government than they would have done under his government. Inflation is down from 7.3% down to 2.7%. Interest rates are down 225 basis points, putting $320 a fortnight into an average mortgage holder's back pocket. They're the people that we care about, and we want to make sure they've got money so they can navigate the cost of living crisis. And we've got our economy growing after he put it into recession.
Supplementary question. Why did he promise $250 a fortnight to families with kids if he can't point to a single family that's received it?
Well, I'd really think that member, I look forward to him reversing some positions, because he didn't support us on tax relief for lower middle income workers, adjusting the tax thresholds. He doesn't support the Family Boost policy. He doesn't support construction workers by U-turning on his fast-track repeal. He should give that up immediately. I'd just say to the member, it's a tough time for Kiwis. Why don't you get him behind and actually try and reduce the cost of living?
Chris Hipkins makes the point that Labour is not the one in power.
Well, we're not the government, and we're not going to be the government, at least for a year and a half. But we will make sure that people know what our plan is before the election.
Food prices aren't the only thing putting inflation back up again. You may have noticed earlier in the exchange the Prime Minister zeroing in on rates. This government has been talking a lot about the need for councils to control their costs. A decision on whether to limit rates increases by a specific amount is expected before Christmas. Chris Hipkins says an artificial cap could have the opposite effect to what's intended.
What we don't want to see is the government coming in and saying to councils, we're going to cap your rates, and as a result councils have to increase a whole lot of other fees that households still pays, like rubbish disposal, for example. You could see that your rates bill stays the same or doesn't go up by as much, but instead the price of putting your wheelie bin out each week goes up by quite a lot. Councils can transfer costs onto people, which is what they're likely to do.
Coalition partners David Seymour and Winston Peters have both expressed reservations about capping, so it is far from guaranteed. National in 2023 campaigned on the cost of living. Now the shoe is on the other foot. With next year's election looming, the biggest party in Parliament will need to show its plan is working or suffer further in the polls, which remain on a knife's edge. That was Focus on Politics. I'm Russell Palmer. Thanks for joining me. Mā te wā.